This morning, I am joined by Opposition Senator, the Honourable Wade Mark. We're speaking about parliamentary autonomy here in Trinidad and Tobago. He's with us this morning. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, my colleague and friend. And I would like to thank you for having me on your program and always willing to provide whatever information, clarification, or some direction as it relates to the United National Congress. Thank you so very much.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Mark, for joining me. Speaking about a conversation first raised by Independent Senator Anthony Vieira about undermining Parliament. Now, we understand that parliamentary autonomy is key to any democracy. Would you say here in Trinidad and Tobago that to what extent do we have parliamentary autonomy?
Well, when we talk about parliamentary autonomy, we are talking about the ability of the Parliament to conduct its affairs in a relatively autonomous manner as how the executive conducts its affairs and the judiciary. So, for example, at the moment we speak, all our allocations for the fiscal year 2022-2023 is under the direct control of the Minister of Finance and the Ministry of Finance. So whenever the Parliament requires to access its allocation of $150 million to pay salaries, to deal with goods and services, we have to request releases from the Minister of Finance. So far, we have had ministers of finance who have not hijacked or discontinued or in any way humbug the releases that the Parliament would have requested. But that should not be, because when we talk about parliamentary autonomy, we are talking about financial autonomy. We are talking about administrative autonomy. And we are talking about organizational/institutional autonomy. So we must have the right as a Parliament to control our own budget. Mm-hmm. Right now, we do not control our own budget. And the Constitution of our Republic has entrenched in its very structure the principle of the separation of power.
Now, that principle in terms of the separation of power, first of all, thank you for actually highlighting that autonomy can take place in various forms. But the principle of the separation of powers, it may seem absolutely clear in theory, but is it easy to achieve? I mean, it's a debate that I've constantly had on this program. I'm getting many answers, but from your perspective, the separation of powers within the Parliament, is that easy to achieve?
It can be achieved. It is at times, as you rightly said, could be challenging. But once you have men and women of integrity committed to the separation of powers principle, it will work. In the United Kingdom, in Australia, in New Zealand, in places like India, Singapore, it works. So we know there's overlapping know that there are sensitive relationships, but in essence, once there is a commitment to observe and to effect and to implement those principles, then it will work. But you know what is required? You need legislation. You need legislation giving the Parliament what is called full parliamentary autonomy. Now, you must appreciate that the executive is the policy-making arm of the state. The judiciary is the guardian of the Constitution. And we in Parliament are responsible for making legislation, scrutinizing the government, supplying finance, and then most importantly, this oversight responsibility that we have to the people of our country. But you cannot leave it to chance. You need legislation in order to effect the principle of parliamentary autonomy consistent with the separation of powers principle.
Mr. Senator Mark, the challenges that you've highlighted thus far, you've highlighted a strong case for financial autonomy. Is financial autonomy the biggest challenge, or perhaps the only challenge? And if that were to be resolved in terms of parliamentary autonomy, would it automatically resolve other factors that you've also highlighted?
I didn't hear you. Could you repeat that?
You've highlighted strongly the need for financial autonomy. Is it the biggest factor or the only factor? And if so, if that were to be resolved for parliamentary autonomy, would every other factor...
What I would say
Sure.
is that there are a combination of factors. But you see, the parliamentary autonomy would be extremely important in the context of finance, because those persons who hold the purse strings can undermine and subvert your functions, your duties, and responsibilities. So what we are arguing is that the Parliament must meet. Our clerk will submit the estimates to the Parliament, both houses. A debate will ensue how much money we need as a Parliament to run our affairs. So let's assume we need $200 million. The estimates would be drawn up by the clerk. It would be tabled in Parliament. We as parliamentarians in both houses of Parliament would debate those estimates. The Minister of Finance is a member of Parliament. And when we debate those estimates, and those estimates are passed, and we send them to the Ministry of Finance, they have to release the monies that the Parliament has agreed to. Because why? We have determined through debates what our estimates would be, what our requirements would be, and we forward same to the Ministry of Finance. So what the Ministry of Finance does after that, they cannot change one full stop. They cannot change one comma. They cannot reduce our allocations. And when we are given the money either on a block basis every 3 months or every 6 months. And therefore the clerk does not have to apply every month to the Minister of Finance for releases to pay salary, to buy goods and services. No, we must have that power.
Well, has there been an issue with parliamentarians receiving their salaries? Because arguably, in the context of Trinidad and Tobago and where we are at this point in time, as much as it's absolutely fair to suggest that you all are doing your job and you all are doing what is required of you as parliamentarians, the issues of receiving money should not be the case. Because given the fact that you all are the ones that are really at the helm of governing TNT, if you all are not receiving your salaries as is required or funding as is required, that really speaks to the state that we're in as a nation.
Yeah. No, as you have said, we receive our money because thus far there has been no attempt to disrupt or interrupt the flow of our allocation whenever requests are made. But we do not know what the future holds. You had this example where a prime minister interrupted the flow of a merit list that went to the president through the chair of the Police Service Commission. What the president was supposed to do upon receiving the merit list was to simply forward it to the speaker so it could be debated. Who expected a prime minister who has admitted to interrupting the flow of the merit list? Nobody expected that. So it is the same point I'm making about the flow of finances to ensure our operation at the level of the parliament is not interrupted. One of the ways of ensuring that is to have financial autonomy legislated.
All right, Senator Mark,
Parliament.
let me ask you: is the financing of the Parliament and by extension the financing to ensure that all salaries for parliamentarians are paid, or whatever resources are necessary for them to carry out their duties, that is also paid. Is that the one thing that the opposition can come together with the government to actually agree upon and work together on, and by extension, the government coming together with the opposition to actually work on and agree upon? Is that the only thing, the very thing that you all could agree on?
Well, look, I just want to indicate that in 2018, 2019, when this motion was debated, there was unanimous agreement. The government, the opposition, and the independent senators unanimously agreed that there should be parliamentary autonomy. The government has reneged. The government has backed away. The government has backslided on their very commitment, which was in their 2015-2020 manifesto. So what I'm saying, there is already agreement recorded in the Parliament Hansard records for us to have parliamentary autonomy. So this matter, this motion that we are currently debating is really designed to just encourage the government to honor its commitment already recorded in the record of the Hansard to implement parliamentary autonomy, not only financial, but administrative and organizational. So that is why I'm saying there's nothing to work on in terms of agreeing. We have already agreed unanimously to have parliamentary autonomy in Trinidad and Tobago.
Mm-hmm. Well, Senator Mark, in concluding this conversation, you've highlighted some very interesting points. But a very simple question. Could the people of Trinidad and Tobago, should the people of Trinidad and Tobago be proud of our parliament as in its current form? Should we be proud of an exceptional institution in its current form if we're speaking about parliamentary autonomy as key to democratic systems?
I would say that the people, yes, ought to be proud of our parliamentary system and our parliament. Because you would recall, when I served as Speaker, for the first time in 53 years, the entire standing orders of the House of Representatives was overhauled. There was fundamental reform. And from 2014 to the current time, we are operating under new standing orders, where we have the Prime Minister's question time, where we have, for instance, live broadcast of the Standing Finance Committee. You know, on Friday, the Standing Finance Committee meets, and you can switch on Parliament Channel 11 and follow every debate, every discussion that is taking place at the level of the Standing Finance Committee. Prior to the reform of our standing orders in 2014, that was a secret. It was held in camera. You had no access to that information. So yes, there have been very fundamental changes to the standing orders, deepening the democratic process, strengthening transparency, and ensuring accountability and greater openness. Mm-hmm. All of these things took place when we were in office between 2010 and 2015. But we cannot stop there. We need to strengthen and deepen our democracy. Democracy can only be strengthened and deepened if you have a strong and powerful parliament. It is parliament that ensures democracy in a country, not the executive. It is the parliament. So we must struggle to strengthen and deepen the powers of the parliament so that the democracy can flourish and grow and expand in the interest of the people.
Senator Wade Mark, thank you very much for joining me this morning on AM Prime, for your time and for sharing this information with us. And I wish you all the very best, sir. And perhaps we can expand on this topic later on, should anything come from the promises that were made, or the agreement that was made between senators, the opposition, and the government. But for now, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Keep well.